All right, we're going to go ahead and get started. Thank you all for joining us. As I put in the chat, my name is Ben McShane-Jewell. I'm with Nebraska Extension, and we're partnering with Center for Rural Affairs and Buy Fresh, Buy Local on this training series. This is part of our USDA Farmers Market Promotion Program grant project. So tonight we're going to kick it off with Erin's going to do a section on legal structures for farmers market and the implications of having a certain legal structure over another. And then we'll take a quick break about halfway through the 2-hour block here and switch over to accepting SNAP EBT benefits that Margaret's going to lead us on. And we will have a guest from the Sunday Farmers Market here in Lincoln. So let's go ahead and get started. Erin, whenever you're ready.
Thank you, Ben. Hi, everyone. I'm Erin Schoenberg. I'm with the Center for Rural Affairs. So tonight we have a pretty small group, but we know that a lot of people who aren't here tonight will be watching this recording later. So we'll make sure that we touch on some helpful hints and tips for both market managers and for vendors. So we will spend the first half of the evening talking about legal structure for markets and vendors. This can be confusing, but I just want to, make sure everyone knows that there are a lot of resources out there. The nice thing about legal structure and SNAP as well is that there are a lot of national resources, but then there also are a lot of local and state ones. And so that can just be really nice to talk to someone who understands where you're coming from, literally, and that can be very helpful. REAP, the Rural Enterprise Assistance Program with the Center for Rural Affairs is one of those resources. They hold trainings a lot. So just to keep that on your radar, why is it important to have a business structure? While there are some default structures, and you'll see there at the bottom, the state might just make one for you if you don't take steps on your own to do it. But I look at it as kind of a tiered issue where there's liability, credibility, and eligibility. Where the liability comes in is that, I think we all want to do what we can to protect our personal assets, as we're able to. And as you're getting started with a business, especially if there's only 1 or 2 people involved and you're maybe not grossing too much to begin with, you might not think about this, as being too much of a step that you would need to take. But you think about some of the accidents potentially that could happen, at a market or at your farm. If you have, the public ever come, you might want to start, thinking about looking out for yourself a little bit more there to separate your personal assets from those of a business. You also just have a credibility, that you want to gain, whether it's to have that status in the community or whether it's to help you get into certain programs. That can be a very big thing, just kind of as you grow, having that credibility as a business. As far as eligibility goes, if you are looking to apply for loans, apply for grants, or participate in maybe like this, accepting SNAP benefits at your market, having a structure defined can be a really important first step. So we'll go into a few more things of this when you're trying to decide, how do I fit in? How do I want to pick what kind of structure? Do I even need to pick one? Here are a few of the, breakdowns of how it can be helpful. This can determine how you're going to manage the structure of your business or of your organization. Makes a big difference even on volunteers, which is maybe not thought of at first, but volunteers are really relied on, for so many markets to really run well. Taxes is always something to consider, and we'll have a little bit more about that later. And then especially I think of the succession piece is more on the farmer or the vendor end. If you have the type of business that you want to pass on to your kids or to other successors, having that structure in place is really going to be helpful for you and just make things flow a little bit more smoothly. I wanted to share this resource because it is incredible, and a lot of the information from the slides tonight is based on some of the info found at the Farmers Market Legal Toolkit. So I put the website up there in the upper right hand, and it'll be shared at least once more later in the slides. But once you go to that website, you'll see right up at the top that pick a business structure. and it breaks down the different options that we will run through tonight. So you see right here, the sole proprietorship, partnership, LLC, corporation, nonprofit, and cooperative. So all those are covered in a really good amount of detail. And so when I took this screenshot, I happened to have corporations pulled up. So you can even just get an idea of, you know, just right away, what are going to be the most important things? What are other people asking about? And I think you'll learn a lot. So definitely bookmark that, spend some more time on it later. I also wanted to point out that the second half of tonight that we'll be talking about SNAP, they also have a really like robust section on that. And even though this is one of those resources that is available regardless of where you are in the country, it's not, you know, specific to Nebraska, the basic nuts and bolts are going to be, you know, very relevant regardless of where you're at. So definitely recommend checking into that. We covered most of this. I think one piece that we didn't talk about before is the amount of paperwork can really vary based on what type of entity you pick. And so, you know, you can always upgrade if that is a concern for you and like where you're at, you know, just for example, Debbie, not maybe having a specific structure, that is so completely normal and okay. Like a lot of vendors are there, and that's no problem because you'll just have like a default structure assigned, and you'll just go through some steps and decide if you want to ever, you know, change it up based on some factors. So for this one, as far as the paperwork goes, the LLC, corporation, nonprofit, cooperatives, there are some paperwork requirements when you get started. It's nothing, you know, too advanced, and there are folks who can help you with that. The corporation probably has the most paperwork of all. And then for volunteers, if you plan on utilizing like a volunteer program, nonprofits are definitely going to be the easiest way to go on that route. And I know, and we might even talk a little bit with the market manager, Jen, who's joining us about this, but their volunteer program has really been crucial to their success. So something to keep in mind for the manager end of things. As it says in here, it's not that it's not possible that you can't have volunteers, you know, with the other types of entities. It's just easiest to do it as a nonprofit. We won't spend a ton of time on this, but I wanted to include it that way when we share this slide deck with you, you'll have this chart to go through. But you can see this, I believe this breaks down everything that we'll cover tonight. This doesn't talk about umbrella organizations, which is one other way you can get structured as a market and a market partner. But these are going to be some questions that you might not even have known you wanted to ask yourself, you know, because with this subject, it really, like, you can just kind of swim in the details and you can't decide why one or the other, you know, and this just really breaks it down, you know, one owner, unlimited owners, you know, up to 100, you know, you can ask yourself those questions. Is this something I want to do on my own? Do I want to have one partner, two partner, 100 partners? Do I want no owner at all? You know, in which case a nonprofit kind of fits in well. So just something that you can go through. Cooperatives were mentioned on that sheet. Umbrella organizations is something that a lot of markets do go with. And this might apply to the folks on the call who are in that situation where I think Erin's with the city, you know, of Crofton. So in that case, there might already be a structure set up that you're able to, within that existing entity, create a market that is not its own separate entity. So that, if you can work that kind of partnership out, can be a really nice and safe way to get started. You know, we have been doing these trainings now for a few weeks, and we've met people from, you know, different rural places across the state who might be from the chamber, might be from like an economic development organization, things like that. I think I've even heard of, like a grocery store creating a farmer's market. And in that case, it fits within the existing entity and it's more protected and just a little more streamlined to get started that way. That's not really something, for a vendor to be able to do quite as easily, but one option. So we'll start kind of with the easiest default structures, and that is sole proprietorship and partnership. And these two are very similar. The main difference is that in a sole prop, there's one main owner. This doesn't mean that, and I'll give an example even where there are two people involved, but you think about it as one primary owner. And in a partnership, there are 2+. It's easy, it's fast, there's not very much paperwork involved. There really doesn't have to be any paperwork, but there is a partnership agreement you can choose to fill out, just to give you a little bit of personal protection. You are not, though, protected. Your personal assets are not separated from your business liabilities. The IRS doesn't really see the person, the owner, as separate than the business. It's kind of one and the same. And so that's going to go for liability, that's going to go for taxes, where the business and the person behind the business aren't really separate in their eye. So if you're a vendor or if you're a manager of a farmer's market and you have not taken any steps, this is going to be the default that you are given. And you are still responsible for fulfilling tax obligations. So my example here, just in my own life, and I meant to introduce myself more in the beginning, but I have a lot of experience. In ag, I grew up on a farm and ranch, and then Margaret of Buy Fresh, Buy Local, she and I ran a for-profit veggie farm. My husband and I started this company seriously where we distributed local food, and then I was part of a local food distribution company too. So in those different businesses, we chose different legal structures. So with the trucking example, which, oh, I'm so sad, my top picture of me juggling boxes didn't show up in this PowerPoint, but just picture me juggling boxes behind a refrigerated truck. So we formed this trucking business. We were married at the time. We were already filing taxes jointly. And I felt that it was only fair that he got all the paperwork for this business sent to him. And it was stacks and stacks of paperwork. Let me tell you, don't think really hard before you get into the trucking industry. And so we decided we would just be a sole proprietorship, which is one primary owner. It's very simple. We're one and the same. The business and the owner is kind of the same. The taxes were easy that way. We just, had a couple more forms to fill out. And we would have, had we stayed in business for longer, we likely would have upgraded to an LLC. Maybe we would have thought about a corporation. And we did actually take steps to form this sole prop because we had to get insurance and we wanted to get the trade name. So it was also very simple when we decided, due to many times getting this truck towed out of my driveway, we wanted to dissolve the business. So that would be one example. Another example would be if you are a person who has 5 apple trees in your backyard, and this time of year, every year you pick the apples and you take them to the market and you sell the apples, and you never took any steps. You never called the Secretary of State's office. You never called REAP. You never did anything, but you sold the apples. You are a sole proprietor. Like, that's how the IRS sees you. Moving on, general partnership. So this, as mentioned, is going to be very similar to the sole prop, except for it's 2+ people. So Margaret and I formed the Darlin Red. We formed general partnership. We were different, than my husband and I. And we chose there to be one primary owner in the trucking business. But this was different. We were not, also life partners. We were completely separate. And so we created a partnership, and we actually did fill out like a formal partnership agreement. That can just make things really clear, really, there's no way that like subjectivity can get into what kind of structure you have. If you write it down, say that you're 50-50, sign it, it just makes it a little more official. And that was something that we felt good about, felt like we were really taking care of things that way. We did our own taxes. And again, if we would have stayed in business for a long time, we likely would have upgraded, you could say, to a different structure that protected us personally a little bit more. But we were in business, I think around 5 years. And yeah, it's something, it's a way to just get started, gives you a little bit of time to think about other entities in the future. So this is what I said before. If you haven't taken any steps, you are one of those structures that hasn't been mentioned, and that has been mentioned, and that goes for a farmer's market as well as a farmer. So if you are a farmer's market out there, you are a sole proper partnership if you haven't taken any steps. We won't go too much into this, but you can just see they are different from the LLC, different from the nonprofit, because of some of the reasons, already mentioned. They are easy to form, but you have more risk involved. And so you just have to weigh those things. Here are some of those liability issues that might come up, in real life scenarios for vendors or for the market. This type of thing happens pretty frequently, really. Like if you think about, especially via the wind blowing, like the market canopies, right? You just want to be protected. And if you are a sole prop or a partnership, what you can do to lower your risk a little bit is to make sure you have really good liability insurance, and you worked with an agent and a company that has experience working with market farmers and market managers. That can be really helpful. It won't eliminate your risk, but it will lower your risk. So if you do have one of those forms now, I would suggest making sure that you are properly covered, and that also if you're a partnership, not with your spouse, I would encourage you to look into that partnership agreement that just lays things out a little more clearly. So moving on up, LLC is this hybrid between the sole proprietorship and the partnership, and then the more tight corporations. LLC is kind of in the middle. This is a pretty popular choice. It's a little bit newer of a structure than like a corporation would be. Corporations are just have more history. And so there are some maybe service providers that are more familiar with corporations, but LLCs can be nice. They're not too difficult to get set up. And you can have many owners. You have agreements signed. Some people might own 10% and others, 70 and 20. Like it can be really split up in that way. You are more protected than at the level of a sole prop and partnership. You're personally, your own assets are separated from those of the business. But like I said, it's this hybrid where tax-wise, it still passes down to the individuals for each member of the LLC to do taxes. Like you're still more or less considered the same in the eyes of the IRS. But, there are, of course, when you get to this stage, there are people who could answer some of your maybe specific questions on all of that, on the IRS's views on this. But my LLC example from my own life is when I was in the distribution company. This was a really good fit for us because there were 6 of us. We, for the most part, owned the same percentage of the company, but 2 of us didn't. And so it was worked out a little bit differently. Having the paperwork is a blessing. Like you don't have to think about paperwork as a burden if it's there to protect you. And if you also just have some help, and there are, places to help those of us on the call, work with people if we aren't those people ourselves who can help with some of that. SCORE, which is a part of SBA, the Small Business Administration, also has volunteers to help with things like this. But with Lone Tree Foods, we had a ton of reasons to be concerned about our personal assets if we hadn't been structured in this way. You know, we rented property, we owned, you know, trucks, we had employees, we were dealing, as you all know, with food, which, you know, you have food safety to worry about. You have just a lot of issues. So having that LLC to protect us was something that worked out really well for us. So that would be that. And so now we've talked about, you know, the sole prop, the partnership, the LLC. The next piece would be corporations. And so these are just that next step up where this is really going to be the most protection for the individual owners. This is really where the business is separate from the owners. They're totally separate, and the business is taxed on its own, and the members are separate from that. This is where shareholders come in, right? And so this is a very common structure for a lot of the, you know, bigger businesses that you are probably, you know, familiar with. This is an older structure, so a lot of service providers know about corporations, and a lot of farmers markets actually across the country anyway are formed as corporations. This is a for-profit business structure, and a little bit surprisingly to me and probably to others is that a corporation isn't actually set up that much differently than a lot of nonprofits are set up, but it's that mission or vision or values that is one of the reasons why they are looked at as so differently, even though structure-wise they're not tremendously different. Farmers markets are usually either S corps or B corporations, and the B is for benefit, and that just really drives home the mission stance of a nonprofit. A lot of people are familiar with nonprofits. They are, you know, kind of in our daily lives. They are able to, you know, step in and provide a lot of services. You know, Center for Rural Affairs is one example, you know, of a nonprofit. The logo that I put in here is from the Sunday Farmers Market, since that's who we'll be talking with later. They're set up as a nonprofit. A lot of farmers markets are. They don't have any owners, you know, and that makes sense, right? That makes a lot of sense for a market that isn't any one person's business. It usually exists, you know, for the benefit of the community, for the vendors, the farmers. This is a great structure if you want to consider it. There is paperwork, of course, to get set up. You can still pay reasonable compensation to employees. You can still, to a degree, compete in the marketplace with for-profits, but you have to be doing it in a way that is beyond profit. That's not your, you know, your number one. And you can't use the profits to, you know, benefit any specific employees within it. It needs to go back into the mission of the organization. One thing to note, if you are a nonprofit or if you're considering being a nonprofit, the tax exempt like level that is pretty highly known for nonprofits, you do have to apply for that exemption. You don't automatically get that tax exemption when you form at the state level. It's something at the federal level that the IRS will have to approve. And here you even see that language, nonprofit corporation. It really is structured pretty similarly. So just something to consider. Again, there's just so many details for each one of these that we could talk about any of them all day. So I would encourage you to check out that Farmers Market Legal Toolkit for more info. Like I said, there's a potential for tax exempt status, but you can't assume that without applying for it and getting approved by the IRS. In these ownership and control, of course, we said there's no one owner in this. There's generally a board of directors that manages the vision, the future of the group. One other that we haven't talked about yet would be cooperatives. And Margaret knows about cooperatives because part of her role at the university, along with Buy Fresh, Buy Local, is with the Nebraska Cooperative Development Center. And on the next slide, even though I think you all have our info, I put some contact info if anyone is interested in learning more. But cooperatives are unique. They're kind of flexible in how they're structured because it can really be determined by the people involved, you know, versus whereas these other structures are kind of already set up in a format and you just plug in the people where you want them. This is a little bit different. The member owners get to determine a lot of how you set it up. Margaret, do you know of any regionally that are set up as cooperatives, or you've just heard of them kind of around the country?
I've heard of them more like around the country. I know there's a few that cooperate regionally in the Northeast.
Vendors could definitely consider forming vendor cooperatives too. Maybe that would be even a more common, nationwide use of this type of structure. So you could work together with other vendors and look into seeing if that is the right choice for you. They just do have a ton of resources on their website, and put Skylar and Margaret's info there if you want to learn more about this. But it's pretty neat that they are part of the university and really mission driven themselves. So umbrella organization is, I think, the last structure that we'll cover. This is common. This is definitely a lot of markets in Nebraska take advantage of being a part of an umbrella organization. This is if there's already an organization that exists, that is an entity. Maybe it is a chamber, maybe it is a municipality, a cooperative development or economic development center, even like a store or another type of business or nonprofit. You could look at it as them kind of opening a new branch or having a new project, underneath the umbrella of the existing organization. So this can be a super good fit for a community that is really supportive of a farmer's market, but no one really knows how to get started on their own, or there's not really maybe one person to step up and do it, or the only way to get someone on a little bit of a part-time payroll would be to use what might already be there. It reduces extra work of setting up an entirely separate entity, but it also gives this flexibility that, maybe in 2 or 3 years or 5 years or 10 years, the market that got started under an umbrella organization goes off on its own and creates its own separate entity. We had someone in one of these trainings, the market had changed hands from one nonprofit, I believe, to another nonprofit. So it was able to remain under an umbrella organization. And, I could see arguments against this, but I would think it would be easier for a market to kind of be the baton passed from one org to another if it wasn't its own entity under there. That can get kind of complicated with buying or merging and whatnot. So definitely something to look into. I think especially if you're thinking about starting a new market, this would be something to look at. And then quick note here, want to do my due diligence. You do want to look into IRS obligations for this, because as I said, there is not a problem if you don't have a structure that you went out, purposely to select for yourself. A lot of businesses are set up this way. A lot of farmers are set up this way. Even quite large conventional farmers don't always take the extra steps to set up a formal structure, but regardless, you do have tax obligations. So look into that. This is again from that same awesome website, Farmers Market Legal Toolkit. So if you have gotten through this and you're thinking this might be something you want to pursue, or you know others who might want to do this, just some easy local, action steps that you can take would be to start by calling the Nebraska Secretary of State's office. And I did this just as a trial run recently and worked like a charm. They're very friendly, they're very helpful. This is their job. They want to help you get the resources. They have a great website, and they will also just tell you over the phone, what you need to do. They've heard every question before. Your question is not dumb. Your question is not original. No offense. They'll help you. So give them a call. You'll get a tax ID number. You can register your business name. It's possible your business name is already taken, and it's good to know that before you make $1 million a year or two and realize someone else already had that name. That can get messy. Trust me, that happened to me before I made $1 million, but it did happen. So register that name. You will also call the Department of Revenue, and that can help. That can be very important, especially if you are selling anything that might have sales tax involved. And these days that happens a lot. Like if you have any market merchandise or farm merchandise, for example, would be one thing. And then Department of Labor, which would help you out if you have employees or plan to. Here are some more resources. A couple of these haven't been mentioned yet. And then we'll talk about SNAP in the second half of the evening. Just wanted to point out that regardless of what structure you go with, someone from your organization will be the one who's like the point person, the responsible party with each, needing to go through those SNAP steps. It's a ton of info and I didn't stop talking, but I hope that this was helpful. Margaret and Ben, what do you guys think? What kind of structure would you choose if you were starting a business as a farmer's market vendor?
Yeah, it's a good question. I guess as a vendor, I would probably just opt for the easy option. The sole prop would probably be the way to go. I think if I was a market manager starting a new one, I might think about something a little bit different. Probably go simple to begin with. Like you said, I mean, you can always get change later, right? To something that if your business structure changes or if you bring on some partners, you can always change down the road.
I like your choices. Good choice on not choosing sole prop as a market. Really, once you hear more about it and you're like, that fit doesn't seem to, you're just so personally liable. You can't control how vendors are going to act or how customers are going to act.
I also feel like too, just the umbrella option is a great one to get started, right? To just kind of get your market established and make sure that customers are going to come and it's going to be worth it for you to kind of go through the whole process of, applying for your own legal structure. Yeah, having those kind of partner nonprofits or whomever they might be in town kind of act as an umbrella for first couple of years, maybe even would be a good option too.
What about you, Margaret?
Yeah, I think I would go with any of the structures that had some kind of support with other people. So that might be an umbrella organization and it might be a cooperative, might be a partnership, but I think that support is really vital for kind of the like longevity of something, because it's really sometimes hard to do all yourself, and that's sometimes a lot of responsibility on one person who might be organizing the farmer's market or vending there. I think my preference would be to have other people involved.
Great. I'm glad that you brought that up. It's great because I sometimes think of, more people, more problems, and that can happen, but not if you are really structured well and you do the paperwork, that it can be helpful. It doesn't have to be a burden. It just keeps things from getting personal in a negative way. It just makes things clear. I think that's a great point.
And we will get started talking about SNAP. First of all, I just wanted to introduce myself. My name is Margaret Milligan, and I work for Buy Fresh, Buy Local Nebraska. And I'm going to be presenting tonight on SNAP at the farmers market, and a quick kind of rundown of what's going to happen during this presentation is I'll give a quick 20-minute rundown about the basics of SNAP at the farmers markets, and then we will have Jen Burianek, who is the market manager at the Sunday market at College View in Lincoln. She'll be on, and we'll get to talk to her about SNAP at her market because they are an authorized SNAP retailer, the market itself. So I just wanted to acknowledge that this topic is, you could spend 8 hours on it. You could spend a weekend talking about this. So I'm sorry, pardon the brevity. Myself, Erin, and Ben are all here to help answer any questions that you might have tonight or anytime in the future. So please reach out to us if you have those questions or just want somebody to talk to about this stuff. So what is SNAP? We need to understand what the program is to see if it's a good fit for our farmers markets or ourselves as vendors. And it stands for the Supplemental Nutrition Program, and it provides nutrition benefits to supplement the food budget of families so they can purchase food. And 38 million people in the United States, that's 19 million households, use this program per year. And to be eligible for the program requires certain household income limitations. So it depends on your monthly income, basically. So people who have lost employment, who are earning wages that don't allow them to purchase the food they need for their families, or who have suffered through an economic recession, a pandemic perhaps, or through a natural disaster. Those are all people who participate in this program. And it is administered by the USDA Food and Nutrition Services. But then each state kind of takes those funds and gets them to people. So the Nebraska Department of Health and Human Services are the folks who administer the SNAP program in Nebraska, and that's where you get your EBT card. And right now in the state of Nebraska, there's about 160,000 people per month using SNAP funds. And when we talk about using SNAP funds, we're talking about people buying food that is eligible in the SNAP program. So that is basically most things that you can find at a grocery store or a farmer's market. So dried, fresh, frozen, canned vegetables and fruits, pastas, a lot of the things that you imagine when you think about food, you can use your SNAP funds for. The major things that you can't use them for are alcohol, tobacco, and also hot prepared items. And that gets a little confusing. So we can talk to Jen from the Sunday Farmers Market if we have more questions about that. But yeah, most of those food items are eligible to use your benefits for. So how do people access their SNAP funds? They access them through using their EBT card. It's similar to a credit or debit card, and the amount of funds are preloaded onto the card, and then you can use them at any place that is an authorized SNAP retailer and that who accepts the EBT cards. So when a customer using SNAP benefits pays for their groceries, their card is run through an electronic reader, which is also sometimes called the point of sale terminal, or a POS. There was like a lot of acronyms to learn in this and like everything else. So I have fun learning the acronyms. So point of sale terminal, or POS, and then the customer enters their PIN number, just like you would enter for a debit card. So where are these point of sales terminals? Who accepts SNAP? There's a lot of retailers that accept SNAP. Anyone from grocery stores to farmers markets to convenience stores, gas stations. These are all places that accept SNAP funds. And right now in the United States, there's about 250,000 authorized SNAP firms. So that's 250,000 grocery stores, convenience stores, farmers markets, or direct market farms that accept SNAP. What we're talking about tonight is specifically SNAP at a farmer's market. We're talking about farmers markets and vendors. There are kind of two possibilities for SNAP at your market. It is when the first possibility is the farmer's market itself will become an authorized SNAP retailer. And that means that all vendors selling eligible food at that farmer's market would then be able to accept the SNAP funds. The other option would be an individual vendor or farmer becoming certified to accept SNAP funds, and then they would be able to accept those EBT transactions at their farmer's market booth, or their farm stand, or their farm store. So those are the two possibilities: farmers markets or individual vendors. What does that look like? I'm not going to go into it in too much detail because I think Jen from the Sunday Farmers Market will explain it really nicely how that works at the farmers market level. But basically, the market is authorized as a SNAP retailer, and then they employ this market currency system, usually by using tokens. If a vendor becomes SNAP authorized, they accept the SNAP funds through a point of sale terminal, like a card swiper, and they're in charge of all of the paperwork and equipment that is necessary to become an authorized dealer. Yeah, and then people can buy their products directly from the farmer using their SNAP funds. Why should your market or farm accept SNAP or EBT transactions? There's a lot of reasons that you might want to consider this. First of all, in 2017, there were $24.4 million of SNAP funds spent at U.S. farmers markets. So there's a lot of sales happening. People are using their SNAP funds to purchase food, and they could be purchasing it at a farmer's market or from you directly as a vendor. So you would be appealing to more people. There's a lot of people using this program, and a lot of people who might be looking for local, fresh produce, or home-baked goods, or meats or cheeses that they might not be able to find at a SNAP authorized retailer in their community. Like oftentimes, maybe only a convenience store is authorized to accept SNAP benefits. And if that is where you can find food, that's where you're going to purchase it from. But some people might be interested in purchasing local, fresh products with their SNAP funds. And that's what makes it really nice when farmers markets or farms become authorized. And it also, this is something that a farm or a farmer's market can become known for. stand out even regionally. If people know that you accept SNAP, they can seek you out to use their SNAP funding for. And also, like a huge reason is the community impact. Like we all want our neighbors and our friends and our relatives and people in our community to have access to food, to healthy food, or the food that they want to buy. So this is a great way to offer that access, and it benefits you as a farmer or farmer's market because you're making sales. So there's a ton of benefits, and we can talk about them more at the end here. We can ask Jen about them, but there are some things to consider before applying. It's not a good fit for every market or for every farm. So you're going to want to consider all of these things: cost, currency, that's the market currency, time, the equipment that you'll need to buy, the marketing that you'll need to employ, the demographics of your community, and the level of responsibility that comes along with becoming a certified SNAP retailer. The thing that I'd just like to touch on a little bit more in depth when we're thinking about things to consider before applying would be cost. So, because it kind of rolls all of these into one. There are multiple costs that are associated with the SNAP program, and some of the, it's up to you to decide if they're a good fit or not, but some of these costs would be equipment purchases or rental fees, staff time to run the program, basically. There's accounting involved. There's time to market the program, to get people aware that your farmer's market or farm business accepts SNAP. So there's some time and energy and labor costs there. So I just want to be real with people. It's not always a very simple thing to start up, but it is very beneficial. And, I would just encourage everyone to work it out on paper first and consider your expenses. And you can, I would say, reaching out to farmers markets across the state who have a SNAP program would be a good first step to ask them, any questions that you might have. Also, partnering with a like-minded organization is going to maybe make this program more feasible for you. Having kind of an umbrella organization or a community partner to help out with some of those costs or labor, time, energy, those things. So like we were saying, there's two possibilities: applying as a farmer's market or applying as an individual vendor or farm, but they really have similar application processes, which is nice. And I'm not going to go into the application process in very much detail. I have applied as a farmer. What can I say? It's pretty easy as long as you have the things that you'd need right there with you. Also, the food and nutrition services staff at the USDA, they are very helpful. If you can get them on the phone, which you can, they will help you through the entire application process and any questions that you have. But you apply through the USDA to become an authorized retailer, and that's true for both farmers markets and individuals. And just to touch on this, you will need these things to complete an application. So you'd need some kind of business structure. Erin provided a lot of things to think about in terms of choosing a business structure, but you will need to have one of those on paper. You'll need to have a photo ID and social security number, and any business licenses. You'll need to provide bank information so that they can set you up for direct deposit. And yeah, like I said, if you have questions about these specific pieces of the application process, the folks at the USDA, they want you to apply, so they will help you with any questions that you have about this. Once you've decided to apply and you've been accepted, you'll need to get all of your systems to run this program effectively. You'll need to get your systems set up, and those systems are equipment, currency, funding, training, and marketing. So we can go through these a little bit, and then we will get to talking with Jen. If you are a farm or a farmer's market, you'll need to consider POS devices or services. So you typically go through some kind of service provider company to get the ability to accept EBT SNAP. And that's the same as you'll also go through that service if you're accepting credit or debit transactions. And the service companies, they'll rent or sell or give you equipment and software to swipe people's cards to accept these various forms of payment. You can obtain a SNAP-only device, so one that will only accept and read SNAP EBT cards, or you can get a device that will accept SNAP along with debit and credit, so you can roll all of those in together. We can also talk to Jen a little bit more about the cost or the specifics of those equipments, but we will keep moving on. There are some opportunities for startup markets to obtain free equipment, at least for the first year. So there's a resource list at the end of this presentation that will have a link to a company called Market Link who's offering that free first year service. So I wanted to let people know about that. So you got to get your equipment set up. If you're a farmer's market accepting SNAP, you'll need to get your currency set up. And again, basically people use their EBT cards to purchase tokens that can then be used at farmers market vendor booths, and then the vendors are reimbursed. But good things to note here are that you should treat those tokens like money, because they kind of are. And also something to note, you can't give change for EBT tokens, and we can get into that a little bit more with Jen. Another aspect of this program would be training yourself or whoever's authorized as the authorized applicant or responsible party. So Erin touched on that a little bit at the end of her presentation. When you apply to become a SNAP authorized retailer, there's someone responsible for the program, and you have to explicitly state that on the application. So that might be a board member. If you're a nonprofit, it might be a market manager. It could be a market owner, but there's someone that is responsible that the USDA can come to and ensure that they are administering this program and handling these funds in the correct way. So someone will need to be trained. Multiple people might be need to be trained on what SNAP is and what are eligible items. And that is really to have someone responsible for the correct functioning of this program. And there are some penalties that can happen if the program is not running correctly. You'll also need to think about how to fund your SNAP EBT program. It does have a cost associated with it, but there are a lot of different ways that you can kind of creatively problem solve that aspect of this program. And it could be through vendor fees, it could be through a local sponsorship or partnership with a hospital, a nonprofit, community action. Even some private businesses are interested in partnering with markets to provide SNAP at the farmers market. There's also some markets that fund their programs through credit and debit transaction fees or fundraising events. So there's options out there, and we can talk a little bit more about those in a few minutes. And the final thing, you will need to think about how to let people know that you've done this amazing thing and become a SNAP authorized retailer. So there is some marketing that needs to be done. And that again, like it could be partnerships, it could be kind of on the ground flyering, telephone calling, networking. There's a lot of different possibilities there. So when you guys get this presentation, you can use this resource links to find out some more information about the program and how you might implement it either on your farm or at your farmer's market. So with that, I would love to kind of move on to our interview with Jen Burianek of the Sunday Market at College View in Lincoln, Nebraska. Well, thank you so much, Jen, for joining us tonight. Maybe if you could start out with describing the Sunday Market at College View, like what is your legal structure? How many vendors do you have? Like, where and when does this market happen? How many staff or volunteers do you have? That'd be great if you could start us off with that.
Perfect. Yep. So the Sunday Farmers Market in College View is off of 48th in Prescott in Lincoln, Nebraska in the College View neighborhood. We run from 10 to 2 and our season goes from the end of April typically through the end of October. We also have a holiday market that we tag on the end that's normally in November and December also. We are a nonprofit. We did not start that way. We started in 2005 and then in 2008 we became a 501c3. So our original name was the Old Cheney Road Farmers Market, and we moved to our current location a number of years ago. I think this is our 3rd year in our current spot. So 2018 is when we moved. So currently we have around 42 vendors. Generally we have closer to 50 plus, 50, 55, someplace in there. And we have about 6 rotating volunteers as well that help with the market. We have 2 market staff that are both part-time, so myself and an assistant market manager. Generally, we have about 2,400 customers per market day. This year, we're seeing closer to an average about 1,700 with COVID. And I'm trying to think, is there anything else you asked for, Margaret? I think I maybe got it, but.
That's great. Jen, would you be able to describe how the SNAP program works at your market?
Customers with their EBT card, their SNAP card, they come to the market information booth to run their card for the tokens. And we process it just like we do credit cards. So we have a wireless terminal that we use. And so we swipe it and we give them $1 wooden tokens. Let's see, I have it in the bag here. As we process that, so just, oh, there we go. The back and the front are not lined up. So let's see. So then the customers go and they shop the market just like normal to purchase any eligible SNAP products. And we do have a brochure. I don't have it with me here. It's at the market trailer, but we do have a brochure there at the market booth that kind of walks through and provides some education to those customers. So it's very pictorial, that illustrates what they're eligible to purchase. And we have that for the vendors as well. So it just kind of helps provide that on-site reminder as well. So then they, as Margaret mentioned, when they make a purchase, when the customer makes a purchase from the vendor is not able to provide change back. So it's just tokens for product and no cash change in response. And then when a vendor has collected enough tokens, we generally ask that the vendors collect $30 worth of tokens. And that's because we issue we issue checks for their credit, for their tokens when they submit them to us. They submit a slip, which is nothing more than a little sheet of paper that has information as far as the date, the vendor name, and we generally have credit and debit tokens as well. So you'll see on there like the $5 tokens, and then down below information about the $1 tokens as well. And they add them together. And when they bring this to the market booth, it's generally in a bag, right? A baggie with the slip in there. In a non-COVID year, we count it right there at the market booth, and then we document it on our clipboard. And then I take it home and then I count it again. And I guess the bottom of this slip, you can see there's like a receipt component. So when we count at market, we would then tear that off and then give it to the vendor. With COVID, we're taking a week before we count tokens. So we still write down what the vendor had on their slip, on their receipt slip, on our clipboard, but then not until the following Monday am I opening the bags and counting. And then I send an email instead of having this bottom slip. So I email them, and then I process their check online through bill pay. We use US Bank, so I'm just able to link that and send that directly to them. Now, we have a process of vendor training, and it's twofold. So it includes, we use SurveyMonkey to kind of quiz, right? To have a test basically about the SNAP process, just making sure that the information is clear and that there's nothing that we need to follow up with the vendor about. And then we also have we call it a token agreement, which is a two-page document. And then it also has a signatory page saying that, yes, I understand what I'm able to take these different tokens for. And it includes the credit and debit tokens as well as the SNAP tokens. And then on that page, it has the information that we need to process their tokens through our bill pay. So it has confirmation of the address, the phone number, and who the check should be directed towards. And so that's helpful with that process as well.
Do you know, are there a lot of markets that use like the wooden market currency that don't do SNAP? Like, is that pretty common that you know of?
That don't do SNAP.
Yeah, like just because it's a convenient way for I've never thought about it before. And then it's like, well, I guess you could consider that regardless. In COVID, like in a pandemic, it just would obviously add like a tremendous burden. But in a normal year, I could see some benefits of it, you know, as far as like lack of cash and I don't know. Does anyone else know?
I've been to a market that just does tokens, and I don't think they do SNAP, but I don't know. I've heard it was a way maybe before it was a little bit more accessible to have like a card reader on your phone or something. Having token system was a way that each vendor didn't have to invest in some technology to read cards, but I've only seen it once without.
We have as I mentioned, we paused our credit debit process this year, but in general, I mean, a significant number of customers that come through the market information booth are for credit and debit. So there are far fewer, I would say there are far fewer SNAP card users than there are EBT card users than there are credit debit. And with us not taking that this year for credit debit, it's been hard. It's been hard on the vendors, and it's been hard on the customers, right? So it's done some training happening, but then also a lot of our vendors have chosen to accept cards at their booth, and then they're taking on that additional fee as well. Or we're sending a lot of customers we have 2 ATMs within walking distance of the market. So one is across the street at a gas station, and one is down a couple blocks at a bank that doesn't charge a user fee. So we do have 2 options that are not too far away, but obviously the convenience of no cash, no problem, you just come to us, we'll take care of you, has had to put on hold. And I would say it would be detrimental if we didn't bring that back in. I would say that would be something that it's something that the vendors want, and it's something that our customers want. So it would be difficult not to see a future with us having that program in place for the credit and debit.
That's great. Yeah, and I'm wondering, Jen, we were thinking about the different aspects of this program, and considering everything that you need to do to get this program running and to keep it running. And I was wondering if you could explain how the market SNAP program is funded at your market, and kind of, I don't know how you guys budget it, or what you think about that.
So we don't have a sponsorship or a partnership in place as of now. It's something that we've been talking about needing to do, and it came kind of to the wayside this year. But right now, everything is funded solely through vendor fees. So as far as our terminal fees and paying for the wooden nickels, paying for volunteer time, paying for market staff, all of that is purely just through vendor stall fees. So I think that finding opportunities of organizations that are looking to really promote local food access and healthy food access for all of your community is a no-brainer to have those conversations and get that started. Something that I'm not super familiar with, but from what I understand, right, now is the time to start those conversations, because a lot of people are starting their budgeting for the next year when it starts in October. So September, October are really the key times to start having that dialogue and making those connections with hope for the following year. So now would be a good time to get those balls rolling.
Yeah, for sure. I know, I've been at the market before, and there's been SNAP Ed. Is that a component of, or the folks that do the taste tests at the market booth, the kind of nutrition?
Right. So the Nebraska Extension with the Double Up Food Bucks. So they're not there this year because of COVID. But they generally do come to market. They're usually at market every week, and they provide an educational aspect, whether it just be about SNAP in general, to be able to answer questions. But then they also do sampling. So they would pick a recipe based on what's in season, and then they sample it there at market. And it really provides an opportunity to engage with the customers, right? It's their core purpose. I mean, not only to inspire them to create healthy recipes, but to open that door to have a discussion about what SNAP is, and also what Double Up Food Bucks are, and how to really engage and maximize what you can there at market. So that's something that they normally are at our market, and we're missing them this year. But yeah,
I know they had they had great recipes, and those samples were always appreciated. Yeah, I did.
At the information booth, so our volunteers and our staff always got this snack, right?
Jen, what about record keeping? Like what is involved, you know, on your end with record keeping of a SNAP program, or kind of even the amount of work involved just to get a clear picture about what you're, you know, what you or volunteers or other staff are doing.
Right. So behind the scenes, there is record keeping as far as keeping track of our transactions. So we use QuickBooks for that. As far as the terminal transactions at market, it comes through grouped together. We had kind of talked about that a little bit in a past talk, that it shows up on when we settle the terminal just as a different card type. So it's Visa and MasterCard and it's EBT, right? So it's nothing additional with that if you're accepting those forms of payment also. But then I have lots of spreadsheets, right? So I'm documenting confirmation that it's settled and what the amount was. And then I'm also tracking how many tokens we have. So how many we took to market, how many we brought back. Does that match with what we actually distributed, or was there an error? Do I need to talk to somebody about that error, right? To do more training, or was it just a mix up? And then also recounting the tokens, grouping them. I keep them in bags of 100. So then that way, 100 tokens. So then that way I know what I have at a glance. But I also have a token inventory spreadsheet. And then weekly counting what is brought in from the vendors. So I'm counting those tokens, I'm documenting what I'm getting, and then I'm also adding that to the token inventory as well. So trying to think out, and then at the market, right, we have someone at the market booth, the market information booth at all times, with the sole purpose to help someone who may be there with their EBT card, or in other years, credit and debit card. You can't really do two things at once with that, right? So you can't run, because we do customer counts and we do other types of things, but you can't do that simultaneously while you're running EBT. So we have someone, at least one person, that's just running the terminal, and that's their job, right? Because there's documentation required, because we also do double up food bucks, and so that adds another level of complication to any transaction for EBT or SNAP, because then we're documenting vouchers and things like that as well. And so it's really one person there all day, with the primary focus of engaging with customers as they're walking by and helping people run their EBT card. So I'm trying to think if there's any other component that would be helpful to discuss, but those are the main things as far as time that the process takes.
Yeah, no, that's great. I can really imagine it happening, and you're totally right about you can only do one thing at a time, especially on a market day.
I've tried to count entrants while doing EBT, and then my count is just we just have to start over again, because as soon as somebody comes that needs to help run their their terminal, the transaction is just you throw it out the window and you start over again. So
exactly. I know, we've talked about kind of like the ins and outs of SNAP at a market, and there are like a lot of things to consider, but I'm wondering if you could just like talk to us about how you have seen your market benefit from the SNAP program. It'd be nice to spend a little time on that too.
Yeah, well, I think something that's been even really telling just these last couple of weeks, where people are coming up to the market booth just being so thankful, especially now that our EBT, and I'm sure they have a different name for them, but the free and reduced lunch family. So anything and family that has free and reduced lunch gets an EBT card right now. I don't know how long it's going to last. I didn't look into those details, but there's just a sense of release from those individuals who come to the market booth, because it's something new for them. So that might be part of it. It's fresh and it's new and they're getting used to the system. But that sense of relief, that sense of thankfulness that they're coming and they're able to buy produce at the market for their school lunches. And I think maybe it's just a little bit more raw with some of those individuals who it's a new program for. And I think in general, we typically have around 7, 8 transactions each week that are EBT. And it's been really interesting because there's so much work to do. I'm realizing like how much more we can do. So we have a farmer through Community Crops, that's a Yazidi farmer, and he also works with the Yazidi Community Center, and he is coming to market, and when he comes, there are probably at least 5 different families, and often they vary, right? And he brings them to the market information booth and helps translate and helps walk through this process. And I think it really speaks to the fact that there's such an opportunity to engage with different communities everywhere, right? Not only just in Lincoln, and really try and figure out how to bridge that gap and provide education and how to make the program and the market accessible. And SNAP is potentially a way to open that door to bring individuals to be able to help support local food, to because we do double up food bags, to double their value, right, up to $20 at the market. And so I think I'm just overwhelmed with the opportunity for impact. And I think that just even these last couple of weeks, my eyes have opened even wider to that opportunity because of SNAP, whereas we wouldn't necessarily have an entry point. So there are opportunities when social distancing, when the climate allows it, to go to those community groups, to have presentations, to really talk to these individuals and talk them through the process and make them comfortable with our offerings and how to use their EBT card. So this year also, because we're not running credit and debit cards, there have been customers that are regular customers that are pulling out their EBT card when we tell them that we don't have credit and debit cards. They're like, oh, well, I've got EBT, and so I'll use that instead. And so there's an opportunity there to help educate also. But I think word of mouth seems to be the strongest avenue for getting individuals into the market. So getting out into the community and talking to them, as well as having customers talk to their friends about the program and their experience with the program itself.
That's awesome. Thank you, Jen. Yeah, it's great to hear that this excitement that people have of the discovery that you can use your EBT card at places like farmers markets or at farm stands. It's really exciting opportunity.
Jen, I wanted to add that it got me excited to hear you talk about, how like the Yazidi farmer is able to help other families like gain access to the market and probably feel welcome and comfortable with the offerings there. And, everyone's doing so much. We're, a lot of farmers, you service providers, everyone's, stretched and working hard. And it really is like, man, what an awesome opportunity for some other organization to advocate for this, some partnership, some, grant funding to get out there, because it's awesome. Just you have to hear that it doesn't have to just be the choir being preached to at markets, there are so many other people who can be affected in small towns as well, of course, across the whole state. There have been some like service providers on these different trainings who I think I didn't even know about, prior to them, joining. So, me, not a question, just a comment, but but that's been just exciting. Thanks for sharing that.
Yeah, Jen, I was curious, you were talking in the beginning about, this is a little bit off topic, but kind of your customer accounts this season being lower than a typical year. And I'm just curious if you've had a chance to like compare sales data from this year to last year. In some cases, we're hearing quite a bit from a lot of the markets that we've been talking to that it's been a really great year for them. The customer accounts are going, kind of like you're talking about, this enthusiasm is kind of there this year where maybe it hasn't been in past years. And so I'm just curious if maybe you're having fewer customers show up, but still maybe bringing in as many sales, like people are buying more each time they come, or anything like that you've noticed.
Right at the beginning, we thought, okay, wait, this might be okay, right?
Yeah.
We were asking families to send just one person, and we're like, well, if no matter what, our sales will likely be lower, but maybe since they're going to be purchasing for the entire family,
yeah,
we won't necessarily see as significant of a sales drop. And I've got to recrunch some numbers here with this latest information, but we're lower than 20, or then I guess we're down at more than 30% for vendors. Yeah.
Wow.
So we are not seeing that here at our market. We're not seeing that our numbers are as high, at least not yet, right?
Yeah.
And so I think everybody was kind of holding their breath, hoping that, because I think the original week we were closer to about 20%, and I can pull it up here too a little bit and look, but we're looking at more than 30% reduction in sales this year.
Yeah, that's interesting. That's a big drop. I wonder if part of that is, Lincoln more kind of food delivery options, maybe, like a lot of people are doing that rather than actually showing up at the market. Whereas in some of the smaller communities that may not be there, and people are going to the farmers market more, just kind of taking that in a little bit more.
And something else we did, because we delayed our season start, right? So we normally start at the beginning of April, and we delayed it till May 17th, or at the end of April, and we delayed it to May 17th. And so we were promoting our farmers and our producers, right? So we were saying, you can still do these pickups at these locations, or these farms have farm shares, or they're revving up their CSA. And it went back to what our mission is, right? Our mission is to connect the local eaters with local food production. Yeah. And if we're not having market, we don't want to stop that, right? We want to figure out if there's a way that we can still provide that connection. Mm-hmm. And so it'd be interesting to know. I know that our vendor sales are lower, but those vendors that are doing CSA, that had done farm shares, that are doing farm side pickup, are they still seeing that 30%, or when they look at the big picture, are they closer to normal? I'm not sure, but I think we didn't want to save the customers for the market, right? We wanted to provide access and connection as early as possible, as soon as possible, with the thought that hopefully then they would be there doing their CSA pickup or spending their farm share money at the market. But our big focus was really trying to provide that connection, not wanting food to go to waste and not wanting people to forget about the market, right? We wanted to keep the farmers and the other vendors foremost in everyone's mind. So that could have played a role as well. So
yeah, that's great. There's just so many complications this year. I just remember the beginning of that like March, April period being so much uncertainty. That must have been a struggle on your end to figure out what to do. It looks like we got a question here from Debbie in the chat that I want to get to. Debbie says, what do I have to do to take farmers market coupons that are issued in our state? Is it the same as EBT? It's a really great question.
I can take that one. It's not the same as EBT. So I think probably the coupons that you're talking about are the senior farmers market coupons. And then also there's like a farmers market nutrition program for people who participate in the WIC program. So the Women and Infant Nutrition Program. And so those are different than SNAP and different than an EBT card. Those are more of the like physical coupons, and you as a vendor can, be authorized to accept those through a training that is held at from the Nebraska Department of Agriculture, typically a couple times every spring. So awesome. Ben put the link in the chat. I think you contact Casey Foster, all right, at the Nebraska Department of Ag. You basically go through I think it's an online training.
Yeah, I think that's right. There's an agreement you have to sign with the Department of Ag, Nebraska Department of Ag, and a short training that Casey does every winter, I believe, in between market seasons that you do. And then, yeah, I think that's pretty much it. Then you can kind of they train you, teach you all the ins and outs, kind of like this was about an EBT, and then you can get going. I know that the senior farmers market coupons in particular get used a lot. Like they are very, very popular. It's a great program. Seniors love to go to the farmers market. They come in $2 checks, if I'm not mistaken. Jen, you probably have experience with these as well. Do you guys accept the senior coupons?
Well, we have vendors who accept the coupons, right? So, but the market itself isn't involved in that process. But yep, we always point. We do receive questions about those, and so we help walk customers around a little bit and show them, because each vendor who accepts them has a little sign laminated in their booth, and so we do more of the education on that side of things as a market.
And I'm glad that you asked that question, because those two things are the senior farmers market and the WIC farmers market program coupons. Those are really great ways to increase food access, and they don't, there's not a lot of startup costs associated with those programs. You can basically take this training from the Department of Ag and then start accepting those coupons, and maybe sometimes it leads to something else, like maybe it becomes really popular and decide to go the SNAP route too. So thank you for that question.
Yeah, from my understanding, at markets statewide, that's always popular. Like once vendors get trained and signed up to do it, there are users of it right there too. So that's great to see.
The NDA database, where you can find produce growers, has 324 listed that accept either the senior or the WIC farmers market checks. So it's very popular. Thank you all for joining us. Jen, thank you so much for your time. Again, really appreciate it.